Great. So you probably have already watched the video on lesson plan. How do we write a lesson plan? And obviously, as you look at the lesson plan, the first part of our lesson plan is the idea of writing your learning objectives or learning outcomes. Now, how do we write those learning objectives? How do we write the learning outcomes? So in this session, we'll be looking at how do we write learning objectives and what they actually are. So learning objectives, my objective for this one, for example, will be the following ones. So the following are the objectives. Objectives are important. We can't be teaching without the objectives because everything that you will be doing in your session will be to achieve a specific purpose. And that has to be defined right at the beginning. By the end of the class, the students would be able to identify the different verbs at Bloom's different levels of learning. That will be one thing that we'll be looking at from this session. By the end of the class, the students would have written a learning outcome or learning objective that has all three components. So we'll be looking at the three components of a learning objective, and my hope is at the end of the session, you will be able to write a learning outcome. By the end of the class, the students would have formulated questions considering the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So we'll be looking at Bloom's taxonomy, and based on the different levels in Bloom's taxonomy, you can come up with questions that show the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And finally, by the end of the class, the students, the class would have progressed in their lesson plan project. So in your plan for teaching, you would probably be making some progress in it. At least you will be working on your learning objectives for the lesson that you will be teaching. So benefits of objectives within a coursework. Why is it that we need the learning objectives? How do they help us? I would have talked to us. I would like you to think about it. Why do I need a learning objective? What happens if I don't have a learning objective when I go into the classroom? What happens if your teacher comes into the classroom and has no idea what he is trying to achieve? He doesn't have, or she doesn't have a specific objective for the session. You can imagine the chaos there. But then you bring it to yourself as well. Each one of you have opportunities to be teaching in different contexts. So do you go into the classroom? So the need for us to come to the classes with those objectives is important. It sets the required expectations, both for the teacher as well as for the students. It guides content in curriculum development. It guides content even in the lesson development. So what kind of content do I put in will be determined by your objective. Guides the teacher in the selection of methods and materials. If you have set a specific objective, then you will be deciding what kind of method would help me achieve my objective. What kind of teaching strategies should I use? What kind of resources should I use to be able to achieve my objective? So it determines the method, the resources, the materials you'll be using. And it helps, of course, as a basis for evaluation. Based on your objective, you will be evaluating whether your students have achieved it, whether you have been able to achieve what you intended to. Emphasize the final one, emphasize major points and reduce non-essential material, even for the students. If you have stated the objectives for them, they will be able to decide which ones are important and which one is not as significant, because they don't need to memorize everything. They don't need to learn everything. They don't need to write everything. It has to be all of them directed towards a specific objective that needs to be achieved. Now, generally, they say your objectives, they need to be SMART. You are familiar with this one. SMART: specific, measurable, it should be applicable or attainable, achievable, realistic. It has to be something that is realistic, based on their capacity of it, based on their ability to do it. It is time bound. It has to be done. That objective, that thing that you want the students to perform should be done within a specific period of time. When is it that you want them to exhibit the objectives that you want? So it has to be specific. It shouldn't be so broad that you can't do anything. It has to be measurable. You should be able to know if it is achieved. It has to be applicable. It should be something that the students can do. It should be realistic. It has to do with their capacity. Time bound, the time period for it. Ideal learning outcomes. they include three components to them. Okay, so a learning objective, when you write your learning outcomes, it has three parts to it generally. The first part of it is it has to have a measurable verb. That means it has to have performance. What is it that you want the students to do? The one task or behavior that you want the students to do, to exhibit. Choose the verb that best describes the type of behavior or task the learner must display after training. So the performance, the thing that you want the students to do, would be stated in one verb, and that verb is very significant, and you have to choose that verb very carefully, and we'll talk about it in a minute. So the first part of your learning objective is the performance. The second part of it is the condition. This is under what circumstances do you want the behavior to be performed? This could be sometimes stated as by the end of the class. So by the end of the condition is after they have been learning those things, you want the students to have done this. For example, for my case, I would say by the end of the class, the students would have written a learning outcome that has all three components. So what's the condition? It is by the time that you finish this session, watching this session, you would have written a learning outcome that has all three components. Okay, so that's the condition. The standard for acceptable performance, the criteria, what makes that that performance acceptable? What kind of standard do you require from it? For example, in the example that I just told you for us, for our class, by the end of class, the students would have written a learning outcome that has all three components. So the performance is that you would have written. The condition is by the end of the class. The criteria or the standard is the learning outcome you write would have the three components to it. So if you write, if it has only two components, then it's not acceptable. So when you state your objective or learning outcomes, you have to have a certain standard to it, a certain criteria in it that makes that performance acceptable. So what kind of standard do you want? So how will the task or the behavior must be performed to meet the standard? Now, in writing objectives, the action verb is the most important element, and it can never be omitted. You can't have an objective without the action verb. So there must be an action verb, and the action verb must be very carefully selected. It states precisely what the student will do following the instruction. So our learning outcomes could be related to the learning domains. Now, learning happens in different areas, at least three domains, three areas. One is the cognitive part of it, there is the affective, and there is the psychomotor. So we can have objectives related to the cognitive, what you want the students to be learning cognitively, affective in terms of their disposition towards learning. It could be related with whether they are receiving something, responding to something, if it is changing their values, and it can be at different levels. So it could be related with their affective, with their attitudes. It could be with their knowledge. It could be with the practical thing, the physical thing that they are capable of doing. So your objective can be in all those three areas: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. In this session, however, I'll be focusing only primarily on the cognitive aspect of it, with the cognitive level. I would encourage you to look at the affective. It's brilliant. It's amazing things in there that you can learn. So when we think of the cognitive, Bloom has come up with this level at which students can learn, at which we can design our learning objectives. And so it's called the Bloom taxonomies. There are different taxonomies, different words that would enable us to teach at different levels. Now, when you teach, you can be teaching at this different levels here, as you can see. So the first level that we can see here is you see this one. It is the recall. This is the knowledge level. And then it goes up. So the level goes higher. The complexity of it goes higher. From just recalling something to the point where they are able to judge something else, or to be able to come up with something new. That is the synthesis. So the level of complexity goes higher. Now, the encouragement for us is to design our learning outcomes not just at the knowledge level here. This is the most basic level of learning. And that seems to be the way we tend to be teaching. We just want to give knowledge, information to the students and be able to recall it and regurgitate it and just give it back to us. But that is very basic. We should allow our students to be able to perform at a higher level. So if you push it a little bit higher, that would be comprehension. They don't just have the information, but they are able to explain that information for you. They can summarize it, explain it. That would be a higher level of learning compared to the knowledge, the information, the recall level. Now, if you take it a little bit higher, take it to the application, at that level, they're not able to, they don't necessarily have just the information and not just be able to explain it, but they are also able to show you applying it, seeing how it works, illustrating it, demonstrating for you in different contexts. Now, that is a higher level of learning. So when we teach, we would like to be thinking and teaching at higher levels, higher than the knowledge. It doesn't mean the knowledge level is not important, because you need that. You need that, but you should not be content with that. You should be able to go higher. So let's go a little bit more in detail in each one of them. So broadly, they divide them into three levels. Okay, the first two, the recall, the knowledge and comprehension is put in one level as level 1 recall, but let's explain each one of them. The knowledge level. This involves the process of remembering learned material. This has to be remembering what are the names of the 12 disciples. Okay, you probably won't remember all of them, but at least some of them. But when you get them to recall, to tell you the names of the 12 disciples, or what are the names of the 3 disciples that were closest to Jesus, this is recall. It just helps you to recall the names. So learners are expected to remember an idea, phenomena, or a fact in some other form in which it was learned. So it's basically giving back. So name some of the verbs that can be used. Name the 12 disciples. Locate where this church is found. Recognize, describe, identify, list. These are some of the verbs. And if you go into like Google and ask for Google Bloom's taxonomy, you will find lots of verbs that you can use. But these are few of those ones. So describe, identify, list, name, locate, recognize. These are verbs at the knowledge level. So the question is, can students recall information? This is the first level. The second level, the second one is comprehension. Comprehension now goes higher than the first one, the knowledge. This involves the process of explaining material that has been learned. So they have it, they got the information, but now they can explain it to you. They can explain it back, they can explain it to other students. So learners are expected to understand and explain, summarize in their own words. Not the way it was given to them, but they can explain it, they can summarize it in their own words. Some of the verbs is they can comprehend, explain, distinguish, generalize, summarize. These are some of the verbs at the comprehension level. The question here is, can students explain an idea or concept? Can students explain ideas or concepts? Now, moving to the next level, interpretation. Under this one, we have the application and the analysis. Application part, this involves using the knowledge to find or develop new solutions. Use the information in a context different from where it was learned. So you may have used it in the classroom, you have learned it in the classroom, but then when you are able to take it and apply it in a different context, that is the level of learning at application. So you want the students not only to do it in the classroom the way you did it, but take that one and apply it in their own context. So this is the third level. When they have the information, they have comprehended it, and now they are able to use it in another context. That is a higher level of learning, and that's what we want. We want our students to be able to use it in their own context, see how they can use it in different contexts. So some of the verbs here is illustrate, change, implement, demonstrate. These are some of the verbs. Question will be here, can students use the information in another familiar situation? What you have learned here, can you use it in a different situation? Analysis, this involves the ability to break down material into component parts. So the ability to break it apart and look in detail, in depth into something, that's a higher level. So analysis is a higher level of learning. Students are enabled to show relationships, be able to compare, be able to contrast, take this one, break it apart, see how does this work, how does this relate with that one, how is this different from the other one, how do they compare, how do they contrast. So when they are able to take an idea and be able to compare it and contrast it with another idea, that is analysis level. Some of the words here, verbs: analyze, break down, compare, differentiate, organize, contrast. All of these ones are that fourth stage of verbs, level of verbs. Can students break information into parts to explore understandings and relationships will be the question. Now in the third level, this is the problem solving level. This is analysis, synthesis and evaluation. Now in some of the older levels of it, we have evaluation to be on the top. The newer ones have synthesis on the top. So I think that's the way it should be. Synthesis will be the highest part of it, being able to create something, and evaluation will be lower. So evaluation, this cognitive function involves the ability to judge the value of something for a given purpose. It includes the ability to judge using material standards and external criteria to bring about informed decisions. So this is your ability to judge something on the basis of the things that you have learned. So when our students have learned something, and based on what they have learned, if they are able to judge something else, judge something else, evaluate something else, that is a higher level of learning. Compare, contrast, critique, conclude, evaluate, judge. These are some of the verbs. Can students justify a decision or a course of action? In a minute, I'll give us an example based on the Good Samaritan, the story of the Good Samaritan, and use these different levels to help us understand. The final stage is the synthesis. This involves the ability to generate a hypothesis or a theory. The learner takes things and reorganizes them in a new way, or creates new or original concepts. This is the highest part of it. So the students, it's not just knowledge, information, it's not just understanding, it's not just using application, it's not just be able to analyze or evaluate, but also uses the things that he has learned to create something new out of the things that he has learned or she has learned. When you write your thesis, that's what you're doing. You're looking at the works of other people in your literature reviews and all that, and you go out and you collect your data and you come up with something new. That is your synthesis. You're creating something new and unique. Can students generate new products, ideas, or ways of doing things? Now, let me give us an example here. Example based on the Good Samaritan. So knowledge level, I'll put it in a question form. The knowledge level is, who left the man lying half dead on the edge of the road? Who left the man lying half dead on the edge of the road? This is asking for recall. It's asking me for recall to just give the names or the people who left. So it would be the priest and the Levite. So that would be it. And so it's a recall one. If you write it as an objective, this will be by the end of the class, the students will be able to name the people who left, the two people, that will be the two people that left the man half dead on the edge of the road. So by the end of class, the students would name the two people that left the man half dead on the edge of the road. Or if I put it into a question form, it would be this one. Who left the man lying half dead on the edge of the road? Okay. Now, comprehension level, why did the priest and the Levite pass by on the other side? This it goes higher. It's not just recalling the names, but it requires explaining why. Why did they leave? Why did they cross and didn't help the guy? Okay, so if you write this as an objective, as a statement, it will be by the end of class. The students would explain why the priest and the Levite pass by on the other side of the road, by the other side, based on the biblical stories that they learn. Application. Who are your enemies at school or in your neighborhood? Now you can see this is taking it and applying it to their context. It's not in the classroom anymore. It is seeing it, how does this work in my context here, application. What could you do to be like the Good Samaritan with these people? Okay, so this is an application level. So you can see the levels here. So we can teach at a level where they just give us the names, or you can teach at the level where they can explain why. You can teach at the level where they can apply it. The fourth one is analysis. What is the connection between the actions of the Good Samaritan and the ethos of Jesus' own life and ministry? This is the comparing and contrasting the Good Samaritan to that of the ministry and life of Jesus. They are able to compare. Okay, how does the life of the Good Samaritan, what the Good Samaritan did, compare to the life of Jesus? Synthesis. What is the relationship between the word and deed in Christian witness? Okay, they are now taking it and applying it, using it in a new way. What would be the relationship between word and deed? What they learned was about the Levites and the priest. But now you take that one and say, okay, the Levites and the priests, they have the words, but there is no action. Now you take that one and you come up with a new theory related to words and deeds. And finally, evaluation. Why do you think that Christ sets loving enemies as one of the chief marks of a true disciple of his? What do you think? So this is an evaluation part of it. Evaluating the chief marks, the true marks of a disciple. So they are going to be evaluating it. So that as you can see, we can develop our learning outcomes at these 6 possible different levels. The easiest one to develop is the first one, the knowledge level. But unfortunately, when you do that one, the amount of learning that happens, transformation that happens at that level is very minimal. So we need to be able to work towards a higher level of learning, at least to the 3rd level, where they are able to take it and apply to their context. So writing objectives, as I said earlier, it has 3 components to it: conditions, performance, and criteria. Condition, this describes the relevant factors associated with the desired performance. When do you want it to happen? After attending a lecture, following a review of a demonstration, given a case study, after completing an assignment, all these are possible conditions. Performance, the activity the students are expected to exhibit under the stated conditions. The students will list, the students will explain, the students will compare. All of this ones, this is the performance. Criteria, this is, as I said earlier, what is it acceptable? What makes it acceptable? It could be stated as % of correct responses. They should earn 70% of it within a given time period, within a month, within 3 weeks or something, in compliance with criteria presented by the faculty. Okay, this could be some of the ways you can set a criteria. Now, the order of tenses, when you write your learning objectives, it has an order of tense. For the most part, it will be condition, performance, criteria. So this is the order of your tense. Condition will be there, then performance, and then the criteria. So by the end of the class, the students will write the 3 learning objectives with 3 components to it. So condition, performance, and the criteria. That's the way it usually is. After attending a lecture and studying the assigned materials, the students will. So sometimes when you have 3 different objectives that you will be setting, but the condition is the same, then you don't need to necessarily write the condition all repeatedly. So you can write the condition once, as you can see here. You can write it once, and then state the performance in the criteria. So after attending the lecture and studying the assigned materials, the students will, and then you write the performance and the criteria below. Now there are some non-functional verbs you want to avoid, verbs that don't make sense. Okay, so you want to avoid those ones. For example, shows interest in. You can't measure, it's not measurable. So you want to avoid that. Awareness of, they will have an awareness of, it's difficult to measure. Learns, you don't know how much the student has learned. So this is non-functional. Understands, becomes familiar with, knows, is capable of. So these are some verbs that are not very functional, and you may not be helpful for you or the students, and so you want to avoid those ones. Now, I'd like you to take a minute or two and look at this one and write a learning objective. Considering the topic that you'll be using, considering the topic that you'll be teaching in class, see if you can write a learning objective that has all those three components. Okay, let me quickly check with us, see what level would this following questions be teaching at or assessing. So if I say, answer the following questions in relation to the 5 factors that underpin effective learning. And I say, list the 5 factors. What level would this be? Okay, so it would be the first level, it would be knowledge. Describe each of the factors. This will be again level 1. They are just describing what it is. They're not explaining, they're not summarizing, they're just describing to you what it is. For the most part, that would be first level, knowledge. Using the story of Emmanuel in Unit 5 illustrates how he could have addressed each of the 5 factors. This would mostly be the application part of it. Discuss the following key principles in the facilitation of learning in detail and describe how each one applies in your context, and it gives you the principles. So here is asking us to do 2 things. One, it is asking to discuss. This will be second level. Person has to understand it. And not just understand, but he is also asked to show how it applies. So this is a level of application. So this question is assessing at the level of understanding, comprehension, and also at the level of application. Describe the 4 stages in the facilitation of learning. So this one, the verb here is describe. That describe the 4 stages. It could be level 1, where they are just explaining, telling you. I guess this could be second level, because they're going to be explaining what each of the 4 stages are. They're not just naming it for you. And then which of them are the ones that have the most impact on our teaching sessions? Now this one is asking, it is evaluating, it is analyzing. So this could be at the level of analysis. They're going to be comparing the different ones, the different stages, and seeing which ones have the most impact. So this will be the analysis of it. They will be analyzing, they will be comparing and contrasting to see which of them have the most impact. So this is how we write a learning outcome, what the learning outcome has, what components it has, and at what level we can be teaching. So I hope this is helpful. So as you begin to write your learning objectives for your teaching, please make sure that you use these principles. Thank you.